Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here with all of you to have this opportunity. So I seek the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas so that I can speak something on this very delicate and important topic of hermeneutics. So today I'll be discussing on the topic of values. There are multiple documents to be shared. So I have opened the same file in multiple tabs so that you won't have to search in your files. And it should be relatively easy for you, but I'll mention also where we are going to, what we are going to discuss and where. So today we'll discuss about the values that are important for understanding the principles of hermeneutics. So this is the verse, this is the prayer which we are working, which we'll start with. This is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur song, Ohe Vaishnava Thakur. Chaya Vega Domi, Chaya Dosha Shodhi, Chaya Guna Deho Dase, Chaya Satta Sanga, Deho He Amare, Boshechi Sangera Ashe. So he is telling over here that what do we mean by Vaishnava qualities? Chaya Vega Domi. So we have the 6 urges. Now we will focus not just on the principle of the urges said diverting us from our Krishna consciousness, but especially in terms of how they shape how we pursue Shastra. The 6 urges are there. Then Chaya Dosha Shodhi, Chaya Guna Deho Dase. This refers to the 6 things that are damaging to bhakti, which I mentioned in the Updeshamrit. So basically this is the whole verse is a paraphrase of the first few verses of the Updeshamrit. So 6 urges in the first verse, then the 6 activities Shadvir Bhakti Vinashyati in the second verse, then Shadvir Bhakti Prasiddhati in the next verse, that's Chaya Guna Deho Dase, then Chaya Satta Sanga Deho He Amare, that please give me the 6 forms of association, that is Bhuyama Khyati Pruchati and those things. Boshechi Sangera Ashe, and this is what I aspire for. So it is significant over here that in songs like this, directly Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not really praying that please let me become a scholar, that he is saying that by these methods, by these activities, ultimately the import of scripture will be revealed to us. So in our tradition, the broad understanding is that knowledge is not just a function of study. Knowledge is a function of, we could say broadly speaking, virtue. And it is not just in the Vaishnava tradition. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam. He says knowledge results from Sattva, from the cultivation of mode of goodness, from the way we exist, way we function ourselves, way we live. And then that, yes, study is a part of it, but it's the way we live that determines the knowledge that we acquire. And then of course in the Bhagavad Gita further. So why are values so important? We could say because at one level our values determine what we value. That's a simple meaning of values, that our values determine what we value. So even when we study scripture, what we value will be shaped by our study of scripture. So now to do a quick recap of what is hermeneutics, discuss that there is a theory, we discuss the broad principles of what it is that we are going to, what are the principles for understanding Shastra, and then the theory and method underpinned by values means that we have principles, we have tools, but guiding all of these will be the Vaishnava qualities. And let me share a quick graphic of the 6 qualities which we have discussed over here. We will go through this. I'll do a quick overview of that, and then we'll go into our exercises. So broadly speaking, the 6 qualities that I mentioned here, there is loyalty to text and tradition. This is fundamental. We start with this quality. Ultimately, it is not that we are coming up with our own ideas. We are based on Shastra. So, and not just Shastra, but how Shastra is understood in the tradition that we belong to. So that is the first aspect. Now, if you consider it in 2 ways over here, you can move. So this is, we could see, now these are not necessarily hierarchical, but let's start with this particular thought process. We start with loyalty to the tradition, and then we will have 2 distinct things. One is, for understanding this, there is humility and service attitude. That, okay, just being loyal, how am I going to express that? That is, we say, tad vidhi pranipate. No? So humility and service attitude is required. That is one way loyalty is there. But that is not the only way loyalty is there. Another way is, or we could say another virtue is that we need to, okay, I'll just listen to and accept what you say. Well, that is there. But the Bhagavad Gita also exhibits that Arjuna asks questions. So there is a search for truth. It is not indoctrination, it is education. It is that we ourselves are eager to learn, to understand, to realize. So yes, in principle, we are faithful to script. Now, each of these is a distinct principle. At the same time, I'll try to present them as not just a progression, but as a cyclic process of deepening understanding. So our loyalty is expressed not just by humility and service attitude, because this knowledge is descending and we learn by that humility. But at the same time, it is also, we have to be eager to learn, jigyansu, that athato brahma jigyasa is required. Now, when this is there, so at one level, this is more of, if you move from here, there is a hierarchical aspect to the knowledge, and there is also a horizontal aspect to the knowledge. Horizontal means, hierarchical means we learn from the guru, but there is guhyam akhyati pruchyati. So there is honest and authentic conversation, and there is openness to change and transformation. What do I mean by this? That, say, I may study scripture, I may be faithful, I may be humble, I may be really seeking the truth, but ultimately I am a finite being. So I will understand scripture values that I have brought in from my pre-devotional life, or even within my devotional life, the way I was introduced, the environment in which I grew up. So we will value certain things in Krishna consciousness. So honest and authentic conversation. Now this can apply to even people outside our tradition. We can have conversation with other spiritual practitioners, other spiritual traditions, but primarily with those in our tradition, in our particular movement. So okay, if somebody is seeing something in a different way, why are they seeing it that way? Yesterday, Haripashit Prabhu mentioned about the various modes in which we may interact. So for some people, loyalty to the text and tradition may be of paramount importance, and this value of honest and authentic conversation, they may downplay it. Then what will happen is this is the way. Well, okay, this is the way that I have pursued with my understanding, but maybe other devotees, based on their understanding, their realization, their experience, they pursued things in a different way. So honest and authentic conversation is important, so that we broaden our understanding of what actually Shastra is teaching. So following Shastra is not so much like being on a thin line which you always have to go along. It's a broad pathway, and different people may be on that pathway in different ways. So that honest and authentic conversation broadens our understanding. And just conversation is not enough. We need to have openness to change and transformation. So if I hear someone out solely for the purpose of refuting that person, so I hear someone and then, okay, now I got this. This point is wrong, this point is wrong, this point is wrong, this point is wrong. No, maybe my understanding needs to be more expanded, revised, refined. So it's not just conversation, but it's also willingness to change, to transform, to, okay, this was my understanding, this is my understanding now. So we are still, it's like Krishna and Krishna's wisdom coming in the tradition. It's one, it's infinite in one sense. So our understanding evolves. There's a beautiful section in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that in 10.8, he says that aham sarvasya prabho mattaha sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. So he says Buddha are the people who are enlightened. Those who know me as the ultimate reality, as the source of everything, they are enlightened. So we could say that is, they've learned from Krishna, they're loyal to the tradition, they understood Krishna's supremacy. But the next verse Krishna says that Machitta madgataha prana bodhayantaha parasparam kathayantasya mam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. So here what is Krishna saying? That my devotees, their lives are dedicated to me, they constantly think about me, and they delight in, it is not just discussing. Bodhayantaha is actually enlightening. They delight in enlightening each other about me. Now the question may come up, the previous verse 10.8 has already said they're enlightened, they're Buddha. But how can be there bodhayantaha then? So Prabhupada explains in a lecture that because Krishna is unlimited, we can unlimitedly continue to knowing about him. We keep getting enlightened on and on and on. So that's why even if I accept Krishna as the ultimate reality, somebody else accepts Krishna as the ultimate reality, but still the enlightened can keep enlightening each other. And that's why this honest and authentic conversation and openness to change and transformation are extremely important. That, okay, you are perceiving Krishna from this way, you are perceiving Krishna consciousness from this way, I'm perceiving it from this way. So openness to change and transformation, that is the even the enlightened can keep enlightening each other. And the last part is benevolence and generosity. That this means that we don't presume the worst motive when others differ from us, when others' understanding is not only different from us, sometimes it may be opposite to ours. Now, it's very easy that, especially when we are in a spiritual circle where, say, we want to develop virtue, then what happens is a person who has a different opinion from us, it's not only that that person is considered wrong, we might consider the person not just wrong, but wrong-headed. And not just wrong-headed, but wicked. That means, wrong-headed means you're stubborn, obstinate, and wicked is downright evil. So that can happen because we often equate our opinion with virtue. This is the right thing, this is virtue. And then anybody who's opposing me, then that person becomes, that person has a vice. So benevolence and generosity means that actually, if somebody is also trying to serve Krishna, somebody is practicing bhakti, somebody is in our movement for many decades now, if they have a different understanding, that maybe they're not wrongly motivated. If there is something here going on which I don't understand. So it's relatively speaking. So now these three values, I would like to focus more on. See, the first three are loyalty to tradition. Hardly any of us will question that principle, that our text and tradition is glorious. And as far our Guru Varga is concerned, Srila Prabhupada, we'll always have humility and service attitude. We will have discerning search for the truth with respect to study of scripture. But it is these three which, if they are lacking, this is the domain where, broadly speaking, we can have vad, samvad, or we can go toward vitanda. So benevolence and generosity means we don't presume that the other person is wrongly motivated. is they may just have a different opinion. That doesn't mean they are wrong-headed or they are wicked. And when we start with this, when we have this value, then so many of the conflicts which can become escalated, can become aggravated, can be avoided, can be at least minimized. So all of you have read about it, but I wanted to present it in this perspective. So as I said, if you see them as a not just as one value relating to another, but it's a cyclic whole which will lead us to deeper and deeper understanding. So I won't go into the Shastric quotes for each of these values, but this is a quick introduction of the 6 values. Now we will be doing this exercise. Now this is in your student handbook. We are on 4.1 section. This is page 33. So choose a specific quality, and I said, how does the lack of it lead to misunderstandings, splits, divisions, and so forth? So, and what experience do you have with the presence of one of these specific qualities leading to harmony within the devotee community in regard to understanding Shastra? And in your personal study, which of these qualities do you find helpful in your personal life? Which quality have you found helpful till now, and which qualities would you find helpful? So these are 2 different questions. And how could you make a plan for cultivating these qualities? So now well-formed plan is itself a quite a elaborate material that it's very systematically designed over here. So this is stated in positives, and within our control of what we can do, within our according to specific time and place, behavior, thoughts, and values, and harmony within the person's lives and goals. So we'll break now so that you can do these exercises. How do we go ahead now? I'll just pause for time the exercise is done, or
well, if you like, we can do the answers to 1 and 2 as a plenary, so people can raise their hands, and then the rest of them to give 20 minutes for people to work on individually, and then we can come back and we can discuss. Will that work for you? Is that all right for you? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Choose a specific quality that the absence of which leads to misunderstanding, splits, divisions, and so forth. And second is which quality, each of these qualities, the presence of it leads to harmony with respect to understanding of Shastra. So would any of you like to share based on your experiences? One of the first things I learned from you doing interfaith is that when we are doing interfaith, it's not for conversion. It's more for convergence. You could say that we want to have a discussion and we want to come together. So there could be different modes of interaction. And I remember one of the things which you said at that time was that I said, are you really interested in their tradition, specific their theology? So you said that when you interact with these other people from other traditions, what you appreciate is how God is acting in their tradition also. So in one sense, that honest and authentic conversation can be okay, not just this person is deviating, this person is doing this. How is Krishna manifesting in this person's life? Sometimes we focus too much on what a person is doing and not on what Krishna is doing in their life. But okay, that person may be doing certain things, but irrespective of what they're doing, right or wrong, still Krishna is acting in their lives. So through honest and authentic conversations, we can actually understand how is Krishna acting in this person's life. So that's something which I can say that I'm repeating your words. Thank you. So when there's a mood of learning more about Krishna, then that mood leads to a lot of positivity. Think unless we are open, so humility brings about that openness. So thank you. Now, I can see a lot of you. There are a lot of hands raised. Could we discuss about the second virtue over here? Second value, that the absence leads to problems, where you have experienced that. Let me put it this way, that rather than saying that somebody doesn't have these 6 values, my understanding would be that some people may value one thing much more than others. Like I said, some people may value the fidelity to tradition much more than honest and open conversations. So that could lead to a mismatch. So again, I mean, if we are being benevolent to others, saying that they don't have these values, well, they may value one thing more than others, and then that could lead to problems. So is hermeneutics a magic wand that is going to resolve all conflicts? Well, this is Kali Yuga. It is the age of Kalaha. So conflict and dissension in one sense is unavoidable. However, even if we can make sense of what is happening, and okay, so why are these differences coming? This is because this person is okay, they valuing this particular thing more. So there are, I have another graphic, if I can find it, let me see, that there is actually, even with respect to there could be polite disagreement, and there could be virulent disagreement, where one person starts demonizing others. So if we have a broad understanding of hermeneutics, then at least we can avoid virulent misunderstandings between devotees. So limits of hermeneutics does mean that ultimately, depending on who will value what, which part will be valued by someone more, that will determine whether the other person, two people can come to an agreement or not. Now I have one more graphic which I was going to show later, but maybe I will quickly show this right now to make this point a little clearer. Now I also want to make one point, that why is hermeneutics so important? Why is hermeneutics so important now? So if you could say, broadly speaking, if we consider this is the contemporary world that we all live in, and this is the tradition that comes from the past, and right now there is the living tradition. Now for the tradition to be living tradition, it has to be connected with the past, but also has to be connected with the world today. So fidelity refers to faithfulness, and flexibility refers to resourcefulness. Now Prabhupada was very faithful, but at the same time Prabhupada was very resourceful. So now what happens is that both of these are required. Now broadly speaking, we might say that conservatives are more concerned with maintaining the link with the traditional world. Liberals are more concerned with maintaining the link with the contemporary world. So now, which is more important? Well, of course, we can say that maintaining the link with the tradition is more important. Well, yes, but is that the only important thing? If Prabhupada had wanted to just maintain the link with the tradition, Prabhupada could very well have stayed in Vrindavan. He would have been rooted in the tradition. but then he wouldn't have been able to connect with the contemporary world. Prabhupada did, you could say, transcend some conventional principle that sannyasi shouldn't cross over the oceans and go to the West. So now different devotees may value different things more. So liberals may, as I said, value. Now, when you say connection with the contemporary world, doesn't necessarily mean that they want to become a part of the contemporary world and have no connection with the tradition. No, that's not what it means. It means that we want to be relevant. We want to be intelligible. We want to be able to. We want our tradition to be accessible. A living tradition to be accessible to the people. So, on the other side, we also want our tradition to stay connected. Our living tradition, our current expression of the tradition, I mean, to stay connected with the past. So depending on what somebody is valuing, things may change. So, for example, now Varnashram is a very debated issue in our movement. So one reason could be that there is a particular understanding of Varnashram, and we feel that is where we should go. But are we going to connect with the people today in the way they are living in today's world with Varnashram? Yes or no? That could be an issue. So what is prioritized, that could lead to differences. So now each acharya has actually embodied this. There is fidelity and flexibility. So when Rupa Goswami was there, he had his own way of resourcefulness. He came from Bengal, but he wrote all his books in Vrindavan. He came from Bengal and he was devoted to Mahaprabhu. But most of the books that he wrote were about Krishna, not about Mahaprabhu. Because he was writing in Vrindavan and he was establishing Krishna Tattva, and he was writing to an audience who primarily respected Krishna. The Goswamis offer obeisances to Lord Chaitanya, but they are not writing about Gaur Leela primarily. So that is the resourcefulness by which they adjusted. Now, if we come to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he lived in a very different cultural milieu. Now, 1890 is just a rough date I have given, but he connected with his times. And when he connected with his times, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the first person who wrote novels in our tradition. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the first person who brought our tradition in dialogue with contemporary science. And that created a controversy at that time also. His Krishna Samhita book was quite controversial. But that's what he did to make the tradition relevant at that time. Now, if you consider Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he also did many things. He was the first person who actually established an organization in our movement. And he is the first person who, the Bhaktivinoda Thakur envisioned an organization, but he didn't implement it. Sannyasis, a lot of sannyasis, a lot of brahmacharis, a vibrant preaching movement. He was the first person who did that. At the same time, he also cautioned. In some ways, Bhaktivinoda Thakur adopted the form of the organization from Christian missionary organizations or even from Advaitic organizations, which had adapted their form to some extent from Christian tradition. But he did that. Now, when we come to Srila Prabhupada had to connect with with the world that was there at that time. So Prabhupada did many things, which just the idea of a sannyasi cooking and serving food and washing the plates of people who are, you could say, mlechas. That itself was scandalous. A sannyasi would never do such a thing. But Prabhupada did that. He did what was required to connect with the contemporary world. So now, if we consider now, we are in 2022 now. So what are we going to do to connect with the world today? So this flexibility is required because the world keeps changing. And in some ways, we need hermeneutics all the more because we could say in the last 20 years, the world has changed more than in the last 200 years. With the availability of the internet and other things, things have changed dramatically. So, in fact, what has happened because of that is not only are people more connected, but everything that Prabhupada has said, even what Prabhupada said in private conversations, is available. So there could be, we don't have the opinions that Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Rupa Goswami or others expressed in their one-to-one conversations with each other. So when everything that Prabhupada has said is available, then naturally, okay, which is more important? So what I mean by this is not just flexibility in connecting with the world, but how do we define fidelity in terms of connecting with Prabhupada? And we have so much of Prabhupada's words. So that is something which is a big challenge. So hermeneutics in that sense is essential. So I'll just conclude this with one more slide. Yeah. Now, if you consider conservative and liberal value system, how it works is Prabhupada talked about details and principles. So the best situation would be if we are flexible in details and fixed in principles. So if we then we will have a vibrant and living tradition. But what may happen is if we become flexible in principles also, then we will just become like a fashion trend. That is not, it's not much different from the mainstream culture. We will lose our connection with the tradition. Now, if we become rigid in details and we become loose in principles, then we will just lose ourselves completely and nothing will change, nothing will be available. So if we stay fixed in principles and we become fixed in details also, then what will happen is we will become a museum exhibit. This is how people used to act in the past, and that's not relevant in today's world. So we need to be fixed in principles and be flexible in details. So now, how do we discern between principles and details? And Prabhupada was asked this. Prabhupada said that requires intelligence. That requires intelligence. And in one sense, hermeneutics is, you could say, the whole course is one tool for helping us develop that intelligence. Now, unfortunately, what may happen is that different people may have different opinions of what are principles and what are details. So that could lead to conflict. So again, that takes us back to the values. Depending on which of these 6 values somebody emphasizes more, they may think that this particular thing is a principle. Others may say, no, that is not a principle, that is a detail. So will we be able to arrive at complete agreement among everyone about what is principle and what is detail? Maybe not. But at least my understanding would be, we won't be operating in a mist. We won't be operating in a haze. Why are different people thinking differently, and why are there terrible disagreements over there? Disagreements may still be there, but at least the ferocity of those disagreements can decrease, and that itself could be helpful. So I'm not sure if I have answered your question, Prabhu, but this is some broad thoughts. I think I have taken too much time now, so we could go on to the next part of the exercise where we break out into groups.
I'm wondering if we could just, because we have to start principles in 20 minutes, and that was incredible what you just did. Would it be okay with you if we did the 4.1 exploration now, individually to finish exploration 4.1? So completely. So each individual to work on which goes through several pages. So starting from question 2 and then going on to page 35. So from page 33, finishing page 33, then 34, 35.
I hope you are able to do this exercise. And would anyone like to share some of your experiences? Well, yeah, it's a very important point. And my understanding would be, actually, I had another visual for this. Maybe I'll just mention it orally. That what conservatives consider that they're conserving may well be the adaptation of the previous generation. That means, are they really conserving the tradition, or are they doing something else? Say, for example, if you go over here, many of Srila Prabhupada's god brothers, with all due respects to them, they felt that Prabhupada did certain things which were different from Bhaktivedanta Thakur, and they sometimes criticized him for that. Now, did the things that Bhaktivedanta Thakur do, were they the principles, or were they the adjustments or the details which he adjusted for his tradition? So what happens is, when we talk about differentiating between principles and details, it is that when we receive the tradition, that tradition is also not like a tradition is not like a, we have the metaphor of a fruit being handed down, and that is true. But at the same time, things are not that simple. The tradition we have received is itself a combination of the principles along with the details as presented at that time. So now when we move forward, when we say, okay, we are going to keep things as they are. Well, okay, keeping things as they are we keeping the principles as they are, or are we keeping the details which were there for that time as they are? So in that sense, it is not that only conservatives are, what you're talking, it's not only that liberals have to differentiate between principles and details and liberals have to adjust, but actually even conservatives need to know what is it actually we're conserving. Are we conserving the details from the previous tradition, or are we from the previous generation's expression of the tradition, or are we conserving the principles that are inherent to the core of the tradition? So that's one thought. Yes. Yeah, I think, yeah, humility is important. Somehow what happens is, with respect to interactions on a personal level, we may offer obeisances, we may refer to others as Prabhu, and we may say, I'm your servant. But with respect to intellectual opinions, we may actually become quite the opposite of humble. And I am right and you are wrong. So humility has to be extended even in the intellectual domain and in the scriptural domain. But humble doesn't just mean I bow down to devotees or I bow down to the deities. Humble means that maybe I don't. I am writing a book on humility. So one of the themes that I'm writing on this, humility means to simply consider that the things that I don't know may be more important than the things I already know. The things that I don't know, none of us is infinite. So none of us is omniscient. So there are things that I don't know. But maybe the things that I don't know are more important than the things that I know right now. So even if you have that much openness, that can also lead to good conversation. So anyway, so that was one response to that. And we have a couple of, would anyone like to, there are a few comments in the comment box also. Would anyone like to speak something? In yeah, that's a challenge, and that's why it's now it's not as akhyati pruchati, it is guhyam akhyati pruchati. It is, we cannot have honest conversations with everyone. There has to be some level of like-mindedness. And now my understanding that word guhyam, sometimes they translate it, it's confidential. So there are two things, there is secret and there is private. So this guhyam refers more to private than secret. It's not that, okay, this is how I'm expected to be, but this is how I think, this is how I feel. Yes, there will always be the tension between the ideal and the practical. And some people will judge us solely based on the distance between the two. But there are others with who will understand us. So it may be only one or two or three people, but we need those people with whom we can lower our guards. And that is where it's like, when you say, that's right, when there's a difference between secret and private, secret means it's not that I am ashamed of it. It's not that necessarily that it's wrong, but it's just that sometimes when a husband and wife want to have a private, want to discuss some private issue, they may say, can we have some privacy, please? It's not that it's secret, it's private. So we all need that private space, and we need at least one or two individuals, devotees in the devotee community, with whom we can have those candid discussions. So certainly it's not possible with everyone, because there are devotees who have particular parameters of what a devotee means. So it's like there are some devotees, you come in front of them, you have to justify your existence as a devotee to them. So we cannot obviously open our hearts to them. So we all have to find that with whom we can do it. And it's not possible with everyone, but surely we can find one or two devotees with whom we can do it. Okay. Thank you, Mother. Thank you. Yeah. It's, for us, scripture should be like a home territory, not a battlefield. When you're studying scripture, yes, we'll be battling with our present conceptions, some of our conceptions, but overall, we it's a we are with our founder Acharya, who is our spiritual grandfather. We are with our the tradition. These are all our greatest well-wishers. So there are some questions, some statements which will be challenging for us. That's natural. But overall, if we can focus on that aspect, that there are well-wishers, then that can help us move ahead also. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Okay, yes, I think we cannot entirely avoid, as I said, disagreements, but if we have some framework, at the very least, we will be able to open up and have some discussions which will be constructive. So it's that we may not, I mean, your point is not acceptable, but at least understandable for me. If every point we disagree with is not just not understand, incomprehensible, it is unacceptable, it's outrageous, then we start making that person a deviant, then it will be a very big problem. As Anuttama Prabhu has also mentioned in his comments that there are high demand religious communities. High demand means that there is a lot in terms of sadhana, in terms of sadachar, in terms of siddhanta that we are expected to understand and apply and exemplify. So it may be that we will have different opinions about different things. So we may be practicing things also in some different ways. So okay, I won't do like that. I can't. I understand where you're coming from. Although I will never do that, I will not endorse that. But I will not make it my mission to oppose you. Sometimes what happens within our movement itself, opposing another devotee becomes the mission of somebody's life, and that is really a unfortunate waste of devotee energy that we can avoid. Thank you. So let's move on to the next part now. There are many principles. We discussed this. So with respect to principles, our broad overarching frame of principle is we understand Prabhupada through the tradition and we understand the tradition through Prabhupada. So this is, if I go back to this earlier figure now, we see that while there is a continuous chain that has been going on for time, because the time memorial, Sakale Neha Mahata, Krishna says, by time, even at his time, it went down and he regenerated. So we belong to a very ancient tradition. We can say 500 years, but it goes beyond that also, to the wisdom itself. So now, while there is this chain, Srila Prabhupada, in one sense, is distinct. He has the founder Acharya of our movement. So we need to emphasize Srila Prabhupada's position. He is not just one Acharya in the tradition. He is a very special Acharya. He is our founder Acharya. But we follow only Prabhupada or we follow only the tradition. So this, if you consider the pendulum, on one side, if somebody follows only Prabhupada, that could be one extreme. And I'll explain shortly why that is an extreme. And if we follow only the tradition, that could lead to another extreme. So we need to follow both and we need a synergy in following both. Let's see how this could work out briefly, and then we will have further elaboration and discussion. So if you only follow Srila Prabhupada, well, the biggest we could say challenge with that is that that was not what Prabhupada wanted. That Prabhupada never said that I am the deliverer. Prabhupada said I am the messenger of my spiritual master. And right in the first canto, first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says that study the commentaries of the previous acharyas. The serious students will study the commentaries of the previous acharyas. And he even includes commentaries of Vallabha in that. It's beyond our Gaudiya tradition, even to other traditions also. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to link us with the tradition. He represented the tradition. So I will only follow Prabhupada. Well, if by saying that, we may not be following Srila Prabhupada. Because that was not what Srila Prabhupada wanted. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to connect with the tradition. Wanted to link us with the previous acharyas. Now, another thing that may happen by this is, if we follow only Srila Prabhupada, we may end up making Prabhupada into Krishna. What does that mean? That means we start saying that Prabhupada is omniscient. Prabhupada knows everything. Prabhupada was probably strongest in his condemnation of Mayavad. And philosophically, we may never agree with Mayavad in the sense that we may not say that I will become Krishna. But what may well happen is, we may not say I'll become Krishna, but we may make Prabhupada into Krishna. By ascribing omniscience to Prabhupada, by ascribing absolutism to every single statement of Prabhupada in all its details. Prabhupada is my only source of authoritative knowledge. we may actually bring in Mayavad into our movement in a covert form. In fact, if you consider another broadly Vaishnava organization is in India, it's quite spread across the world, Swaminarayan. If you read Swaminarayan's teachings, they're largely devotional teachings. He talks about Krishna Bhakti, but based on something on in his Patrika, his followers concluded that he is Krishna. And what has happened is now he has become the central object of worship, even in one sense displacing Krishna. So Prabhupada would never want us to do that ever. So in our attempt to be faithful to Prabhupada, we may end up bringing in the very thing that Prabhupada didn't want in our movement. So that's why following only Prabhupada is not going to be constructive. So that is the difference here, that, as I said, philosophically, none of us will directly say that Prabhupada is Krishna. Philosophically, we will never accept Mayavad. Prabhupada has been strong enough in condemning Mayavad. But Mayavad can creep in by another route. It can creep in by this route of, in the name of respecting Prabhupada, we may end up inviting Mayavad into our own tradition. Now, if I say I'll follow only the tradition, then that may lose the focus that Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada wanted especially to universalize, to globalize the Bhakti tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in one ways. So if you are following only the tradition, now if you go to say Hari Bhakti Vilas and it has certain rules which are just not practical in today's world, and Prabhupada didn't emphasize that. So we start bringing in from the tradition what Prabhupada did not want or what Prabhupada left out, and that becomes our primary source, then we may lose the focus. So Prabhupada did want a global movement, and by bypassing Prabhupada, by superseding Prabhupada, we may end up committing Guru Aparadh. So basically, Prabhupada, we have to avoid both these extremes. That avoid only following only the tradition and following only Prabhupada. And now these two, earlier I showed them in this diagram, that are they conflicting sources? Well, not exactly conflicting sources. One way we can synergize them is that both are coming from Krishna. For us, Prabhupada might be one thing. These are Prabhupada's books, these are previous Acharyas' books. These are the tradition's books. And by the tradition, we don't have to refer only to Prabhupada. We can look at the expression of the tradition even after Srila Prabhupada also. But right now, let's focus on the tradition in terms of before Srila Prabhupada. So ultimately, it is Prabhupada is inspired, empowered, guided by Krishna. Previous Acharyas are inspired, empowered, guided by Krishna. And our purpose is to ourselves connect with Krishna. So Prabhupada says that in Nectar of Instruction Introduction, he says that once we come to the mode of goodness, how to advance further will be revealed. Now, how is it revealed? Prabhupada is talking broadly about Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. I will give you intelligence from within. Now, we're not saying that this is going to replace studying Prabhupada's books or studying the tradition, not at all. But the idea is, Prabhupada says in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita purport that although the connection is through the Guru, but the experience is personal. That we connect with the Guru, but we connect with Krishna. It's our direct experience of Krishna. So all of us, as we become purified, not necessarily in getting some paranormal vision of seeing Krishna or getting dreams about Krishna, but just that we become more and more devoted to Krishna, dedicated to Krishna's mission, then we will be able to see the harmony between what Prabhupada taught and what the tradition taught. If at all there are differences. Sometimes there may not be differences, sometimes there may just a broadening of perspective to understand what Srila Prabhupada taught. So for example, I'll just give one example before I conclude this point, that now for Prabhupada had young disciples who were barely in their 20s or 30s. He gave them sannyas. If you say we follow Prabhupada, will we do that today? Practically nobody, no ISKCON leader today will endorse that. Say, are you not following Prabhupada? Well, we understand. Like I said, when we follow Prabhupada, there are certain details in what Prabhupada did. And that was an emergency situation. So if we look at the broader tradition and how sannyas was in the broader tradition, then we understand, okay, this is not something which needs to be done at this age. So we in our movement itself have now become unanimous in not doing something that Srila Prabhupada did. Because what Prabhupada did was an adjustment of details for his time. So as we connect with Krishna, then dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. In many of Srila Prabhupada's letters to his leading disciples, Prabhupada says this, quotes 10.10 in the Gita, that because you are trying to serve Krishna so sincerely, Krishna is guiding you from within. Krishna is guiding you from within. So this is the broad overarching principle, and we'll discuss a few examples of this. But at this stage, there are many principles, but this principle is foundational. That you understand Prabhupada through the tradition, and we understand the tradition through Srila Prabhupada. Yes. So synthesizing, yes, it could be synthesizing. Synthesis often refers to that create something combining things. I would hesitate to use the word synthesizing. I would prefer to use synergizing. Synergizing means that both of them are sources of wisdom and insight for us, and we draw from both of them. Synthesizing is not necessarily wrong. It's just that it may have some connotation which may not be applicable. So we also had a meditation, a prayer on this, which we didn't discuss. So Hari He Paratattva Vichakshana Vyas Adi Munigana Shastra Vicharya Bara Bara Prabhutava Nitya Rupa Gunashila Anurupa Tomara Charitra Sudhasar. So this is from the Gita Mala Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So Hari He, O Lord Hari, Paratattva Vichakshana, Vichakshan, inquiring, understanding, learning, being experienced about the Paratattva. Vichakshan, they're expert. Paratattva translated to Vyasa Adi Munigan. They are all expert in this truth. Shastra Vicharya Barabar. How did they become Vichakshan? How did they become expert? Because Shastra Vicharya, they contemplated on scripture, they discussed it and deliberated it again and again and again. So Bodhayantaha Parasparam, as we discussed earlier, they discussed it. Prabhu Tava Nitya Rupa Guna Shila Anurupa. So that Tomara Charitra Sudhasar, that your personality, your form, your character, which is an abode of nectar, Sudhasar, that is revealed, O Lord, in their sacred books. Nityarupa Gunashila Anurupa, your eternal form, which is filled with, which abounds with virtues, and your activities, your cultured Shila Anurupa, they are all revealed in your books. So the point over here is what I said about being connected with Krishna. That the meditation here is that these great souls in our tradition, they have, by their devotion, by their deliberation, by their repeated discussions, they're manifesting Krishna. And the purpose is that ultimately it is not just that we accept Prabhupada, we accept the tradition, that is that both the Prabhupada and the tradition, their purpose is to manifest Krishna in our heart. And to the extent we strive to do that, to the extent we will be able to fulfill the purpose of all that they have provided us. So here, look at the exercise. We have the list of principles. We have not discussed all the principles. We focused on one principle. Maybe you could focus on this principle if you prefer, or you could choose some other principle, and we can have the discussion based on that. So first principle choose, and different topics which that principle would help you resolve. So now this list of the session document on page 6. I presume you have the foundation document. So we can do this exercise now. And I'm sure you have, the next question is this, some other principle you choose and some topics which it could help you resolve. And another third principle which you choose and some topics it could help you resolve. So choose one difficult statement. Mataji, should we just do one exercise? Because otherwise we'll run out of time now. I don't think we can do all of them. How do you want to go ahead?
Well, definitely the students have time to do all of them and to discuss. Basically, we're going to put just 3 or 4 people in a group, and each person we're assuming has come to the class with principles and topics already pre-chosen. So basically, in a 20-minute breakout room, they could spend 10 minutes on the first part of the exploration. So the first part of the question 1 of the exploration, which is you choose 3 principles and then you match topics to it. And then in question 2 of the exploration, you have a statement and you match principles to it. So if in each group they spend 10 minutes on question 1 and 10 minutes on question 2, and each of the participants in the breakout room are going to have different principles and different statements. So in 10 minutes, the first person could talk for 2 minutes, the second person can talk for 2 minutes, the third person can talk for 2 minutes, and then a little general discussion. And then for question 2, again, same thing. Each of the 3 people could speak for 2 minutes on their difficult statement and the principles that they chose, and then a little discussion, and then we can come back in plenary. We'll have 10 minutes left in plenary.
Okay.
Will that work for you?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
It's invaluable that you are here to guide us.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You're much more valuable than I am. I'm just a servant. So if we did the, you're the scholar, I'm the servant. So if we did the breakout now and timed it for 20 minutes, that gives us 10 minutes for discussion afterwards, 10, 15 minutes.
So would any of you like to share your reflections based on the breakout rooms? Okay, it's a lot of topics. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So I think we have time to see how that issue is addressed. A little difficult right now. We have a few minutes. So we'll have, okay, one. I was saying that we will discuss more based on what the point which you made, because we are running out of time. Thank you for sharing your principles and thank you. Hare Krishna. And regarding the exercises, I think the credit goes to Urmila Mataji. She is the primary designer of this material. She has decades of experience as a teacher. The exercises are all designed by her. Thank you.
No, that's actually not accurate. The original version of the course was designed by Rasamandala Prabhu, who's got a master's degree in religious education. And then we piloted the course in Houston, just among the SAC members. And then the SAC members who were there, they gave feedback. And then we piloted it again among 30 ISKCON leaders. And then they gave feedback. And so we adjusted a lot of the exercises and the teaching according to that. And then after that, I took all the feedback. So I took the feedback from Houston and amended the course. And I took the feedback from the pilot and amended the course. But it was really, you know, all the SAC members that Ras Mandala, all the whatever it was, 10, 12 SAC members that were in Houston. And then the 30 leaders that we had a year ago who also gave extensive feedback. So I was really just a servant putting together according to all these other people's feedback. Caitanya-caraṇa Prabhu, I'm wondering if we can look at understanding an example of advanced statements. Now, I should mention that we're not at this point going to conclusions. What we're doing right now is just showing how to reach conclusions. And in our next class on tools, then we're going to be actually starting to reach some conclusions, because you can't use the principles without a tool. A principle in and of itself doesn't do anything. It just guides you in what tools you're going to use. But if we want to look at an advanced difficult statement,
trying to aloof from this Krishna society and yet engage in consciousness is living in a great hallucination. Or this is possible.
is that the one you're talking about? And what principles did you come up with that would help solve that? Okay, intended reader or audience and mood and intention of the author speaker. Any others? Okay. Caitanya-caraṇa Prabhu, did you have some thought about which principles would help to understand that statement?
Yeah. This is itself a good example of understanding Prabhupada through the tradition and tradition through the Prabhupada. So Prabhupada said we established International Society for Krishna Consciousness. What of before Prabhupada, before establishment of Krishna Consciousness movement? Are they living in great, where everybody living in a great hallucination? If somebody is following the expressions of Gaudiya Vaishnavism before, that came before ISKCON was established, are they in a hallucination? So Prabhupada is, in that sense, if you just, this one statement of Prabhupada, it seems exclusivist or sectarian just with respect to the rest of the world, with other faith groups, but even with respect to other actions of Gaudiya Vaishnavism also. That's why the statements need to look in, at least in those terms, understand Prabhupada in the light of the tradition, and the tradition in the light of Prabhupada. That would be one way I would approach on principle.
I think we could also look, I like what you were saying earlier, Caitanya-caraṇa Prabhu, about Bhakti Vinod. And if we look at 21, Prabhupada's statements by his application of them in relation to his mood and mission, and think about, and then with Parampara, 22, truth is conveyed through the system of Parampara, and we see how Srila Prabhupada dealt with people of other faiths or other organizations, and how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur dealt with other people of other faiths and other organizations. So that would really help us to understand that kind of statement.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Definitely. Wonderful. Thank you. So I think my lab commented this is engaging and enlivening explore this exercise. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for joining today. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.